On my second week at the new firm, I found my fiancé's name on a property deed that wasn't ours. I was reviewing a stack of title transfers for an unrelated audit. Just background noise while I waited for my coffee to cool, when the name jumped off the page like it had been waiting for me. Property held in trust. Buyer's representative listed as legal counsel for the purchasing entity. I read it 3 times before my brain accepted what my eyes already knew. I didn't gasp. I didn't drop my pen. I just sat very still, the way you do when you realize the floor under you was never as solid as you thought, and I closed the file and finished my coffee. My name is Renee Holt. No, that's not right either. Let me start where it actually starts. My name is Adeline Cross. I'm 34, and I work as a compliance attorney for a regional banking group out of Charlotte, North Carolina. My job is to find the lies hiding in other people's paperwork. I spend my days reading contracts the way most people read novels, looking for the sentence that doesn't belong, the clause that was added at 2 in the morning when somebody thought nobody would notice. I am very, very good at my job, which is exactly why my fiancé, Weston, should have been more careful about which paperwork he let cross my desk. Weston Calloway and I had been together for 4 years, engaged for 1. He came from money the way some men come from height, effortlessly and with a kind of permanent posture about it. His family ran a string of luxury car dealerships across the Carolinas, the kind with their faces on billboards along I-77, smiling under their own last name in 40-foot letters. To the outside world, we were the picture of upward motion. I had the career, he had the money, and together we had a townhouse in South End with a view of the skyline and a wedding date 8 months out that his mother had picked before I'd even said yes. I should have known something was wrong months earlier. Weston had started closing dealership deals that ran later and later into the night, deals he never wanted to discuss in detail because, as he put it, I wouldn't find it interesting. I let that slide because I was buried in 60-hour weeks myself, auditing a string of suspicious small business loans for the bank, the kind of fraud that hides in plain sight if nobody's looking closely. I never imagined the fraud I was supposed to be hunting was sleeping next to me every night. It started unraveling the morning I walked onto the 4th floor of Ashgrove Title and Escrow, the company that had just hired me to lead their internal compliance review. It was a serious step up. Ashgrove processed real estate closings for half the new luxury developments going up in Charlotte, and the partner wanted someone sharp enough to catch what their last compliance officer had missed. I was determined to prove I belonged there. The office manager walked me through, introducing me floor by floor, and we landed in the closing coordinator's bullpen where I met Priscilla. She was 28, dressed in head-to-toe blush pink, the kind of woman who narrates her own life out loud to anyone within earshot. She jumped up to hug me, actually hug me, a complete stranger, and immediately offered to show me the best taco truck 2 blocks over. As she turned to grab a welcome folder off her desk, I saw it. Propped against her monitor, in a thin gold frame, Weston, mid-law, his arms slung around her shoulders on what looked like a rooftop bar I didn't recognize. The air went out of the room. I felt my pulse in my ears. A normal woman might have grabbed that frame and asked exactly what the hell this was. But I am not a normal woman in moments like that. I am an auditor. When you find an anomaly in the numbers, you don't tip off the person who planted it. You step back, you stay calm, and you gather everything first. I smiled. I pointed at the frame with one manicured finger and said, "Cute picture. Who's that?" Priscilla lit up like I'd handed her a microphone. She flashed her left hand at me, a ring, easily 3 carats, emerald cut, sitting heavy on her finger. "That's my fiancé, Weston," she said. "We just got engaged. He's in real estate development, total catch, total gentleman. I still can't believe I'm marrying him." I did the math in my head before she finished her sentence. Handled our household finances, I knew our joint accounts down to the dollar, and I knew Weston did not have an extra ring's worth of liquid cash lying around without me noticing a withdrawal. Something didn't add up, and the math offended me more than the affair did. "Congratulations," I said, my voice warm and entirely fake. "I can't wait to hear the whole story." I waited 2 hours before making my move, long enough to establish myself as the friendly older colleague taking the new girl under her wing. I suggested coffee. Priscilla talked for 45 minutes straight, barely sazver, and somewhere in the middle of it she mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that Weston had just put a deposit on a lake house out near Mooresville, paid in cash, title held in a private trust, so nobody could bother them about it. Lake house, cash, trust. Those words sat in my chest like stones. A lake property in that part of Lake Norman starts well north of $500,000. Weston was successful, but he was not that successful, not legitimately. I knew his commission structure. I knew our mortgage. I knew there was no version of his finances where that math worked, unless the money was coming from somewhere he'd never told me about. That afternoon, while Priscilla was in a closing meeting, I slipped into her office, plugged a secure drive into the back of her monitor, and copied everything personal off her hard drive, emails, saved documents, anything that might explain where Weston's sudden cash was actually coming from. It took 6 minutes. It felt like 60. What I found over the following 2 days connected dots I hadn't even known were dots. Weston's uncle, Garrison Calloway, ran the financing arm of the family dealership empire. Buy here, pay here loans for customers with bad credit, the kind regulators love to scrutinize. Garrison had been quietly inflating loan values and laundering the difference through phantom vehicle trade-ins, cash that needed somewhere clean to land. Weston, with his real estate license and his trust accounts, was that spot, land. He'd take Garrison's dirty money, run it through fake property consulting fees, and push it back out clean, using some of his cut to buy his mistress a lake house and a ring I would never have approved of. Sunday dinner at the Calloway's estate outside Lake Norman wasn't a family gathering. It was a performance, and attendance was mandatory. Weston drove us out in silence, his jaw tight, his mind clearly somewhere else, somewhere with a rooftop view and a woman who thought she was getting married in the fall. His mother, Marguerite, met us at the door dripping in pearls and disapproval. "Adeline, darling, you look exhausted," she said, looking me over like a disappointing appraisal. "All those hours at that new job. A woman shouldn't have to work herself ragged when she's marrying into a family like ours." I smiled and told her I loved my work. She gave a soft, pitying laugh and patted my arm like I'd said something charmingly naive. Dinner went the way it always did. Boastful uncles, a long grace from Weston's father about how God had blessed the family's vision, and then, predictably, Garrison turning his attention to me with a glass of bourbon in hand. "Compliance," he said, rolling the word around like it tasted bad. "So you're basically a paperwork babysitter, making sure people initial the right boxes. Must be thrilling." The table laughed. Weston laughed loudest. I let it happen the same way I'd let Priscilla brag about her ring 2 days earlier, collecting, not reacting. "You're not wrong," I said evenly when the laughter died down. "I do read a lot of paperwork. And lately it's been telling me a very interesting story about a string of vehicle trade-ins that don't actually exist, routed through a property trust registered to a company called Brightline Holdings." The fork in Garrison's hand stopped halfway to his mouth. Weston, beside me, choked on his wine hard enough that he had to set his glass down and cough into his napkin, his face draining of color in real time. "Funny coincidence," I said, reaching over to pat Weston gently on the back. "The registered agent on Brightline Holdings shares your exact name, sweetheart." The room went silent except for the clink of someone's fork hitting a plate. Garrison's wife asked what on earth I was talking about. Garrison didn't answer her. He stared at me with the particular terror of a man realizing the woman he'd just called a paperwork babysitter had been quietly building a case against him for 48 hours. "I can't discuss the specifics of an internal audit," I said sweetly, dabbing my mouth with my napkin. "Confidentiality, you understand. We babysitters take our paperwork very seriously." That night, back home, I didn't sleep. I poured myself a glass of water, locked myself in the office, and went deeper into the files. Greedy men get lazy, and lazy men reuse passwords. Weston had logged his wealth portal into Priscilla's laptop to show her the lake house deed and never logged out false invoice templates and bank routing numbers, connecting Garrison's dealership financing arm directly to Weston's shell company. 4 gigabytes of his entire criminal life, sitting quietly on an encrypted drive in my desk drawer. Weston came home the next evening to find me sitting in the dark living room with 3 printed pages on the coffee table. He froze in the doorway. "What is this?" he said, though we both knew he already recognized exactly what it was. "An $800,000 question," I said. "Explain to me how a man with our mortgage and our debt buys a lake house in cash." He tried gaslighting first, told me I was overworked, paranoid, imagining things. When that didn't land, he switched to threats, leaning over the table, reminding me whose name was on the dealership billboards, whose father golfed with the district attorney. What would happen to my career if I tried to make this public? I let him talk. I let him believe he'd won. I told him I'd been overreacting, that the stress was getting to me, and I picked the papers up off the table like I intended to shred them. I had barely made it to the hallway when the front door slammed open. Marguerite and Weston's father had driven over the second Garrison called them in a panic. I will never forget the look on Marguerite's face when I told her, plainly, in her own foyer, that her son was laundering dealership money and that I had proof. She didn't gasp. She sighed, like I'd told her Weston had scratched the good china. Of course we knew about the girl, she said, adjusting her pearls. Men like Weston need somewhere to let off steam. You're the one with the ring and the last name Adeline. Why on earth would you burn that down over something so small? His father offered me a check on the spot, $50,000, written right there at the kitchen island to take my stress leave, resign quietly, and forget what I'd seen. I tore it in half in front of all three of them and let the pieces fall on Marguerite's shoes. I came into this family with a law degree and a spine, I said. You should be thanking God I haven't called the FBI yet. 3 black SUVs showed up at my door the next morning. Garrison's lawyer slid a post-nuptial-style asset waiver across my kitchen counter, paired with an NDA that threatened $10 million in penalties if I ever spoke the words Brightline Holdings out loud. I let myself cry. I let my hands shake. I let Weston believe, when he finally walked in and saw me sobbing at the counter, that jealousy over Priscilla had driven me to hack his accounts, and that fear had broken me completely. He ate it up like it was the easiest meal of his life. What none of them noticed was that I'd spent that morning reformatting page 4 of their own template, replacing the standard release clause with language waiving their financial privacy rights under federal banking law, granting full consent for federal agencies to seize and audit every account tied to the signatories. Their lawyer, rushed and irritated by Garrison's breathing down his neck about a board call, skimmed instead of read. Garrison signed without looking. Weston signed right under him, smug, certain he'd just bought his freedom. I drove downtown that afternoon and walked into the FBI field office with a flash drive and a fully executed federal waiver they'd signed with their own hands. 3 weeks later, the Calloway family hosted their annual dealership charity gala, the one with their name in gold lettering across the ballroom banner. I sat in a car across the street in an emerald green dress, watching the valets work, watching Weston and Garrison hold court near the bar like nothing in their world had changed. When I walked in, the room actually quieted. Weston saw me first, and the color left his face before Garrison even turned around. You're not supposed to be here, he hissed, crossing the room fast. I'm a donor, I said. I bought my ticket months ago. Besides, I heard there was a presentation tonight. Priscilla found us a moment later, gold gown, that same ring catching the light, smug and oblivious, asking why I'd left my job so suddenly. I told her, gently, that it wasn't the workload that bothered me. It was the quality of the data. She had no idea what I meant. Weston did. When Garrison's father took the podium to introduce the family's next great chapter, I climbed the stage instead, took the microphone from its stand, and tapped my phone. The screens on stage that were supposed to play a highlight reel lit up instead with a flowchart. Brightline Holdings, the routing numbers, the falsified trade-in invoices, the lake house deed, all of it in plain, undeniable detail. The room came apart. Marguerite's pearls actually snapped against the table when she clutched them. Garrison shoved through the crowd toward the stage, face purple, screaming for someone to cut the power, and that's exactly when the doors at the back of the ballroom were thrown open. FBI, nobody move. I watched Garrison get tackled against a cocktail table. I watched Weston get cuffed near the ice sculpture, his mouth opening and closing with nothing coming out. I leaned back into the microphone one last time before they led me off the stage to give my statement. I told you, I said. Paperwork babysitters take this very seriously. Garrison and Weston are both serving federal time now, somewhere upstate for wire fraud and money laundering. The dealerships were sold off piece by piece to cover restitution. Marguerite and her husband moved into a condo a third the size of their old house. Priscilla lost the lake house within the month. Heard she's renting a studio apartment now, working retail, finally learning what it costs to actually earn the things you want. I kept my license, I kept my name, I kept the version of myself that doesn't break, just because someone with a bigger bank account thinks she should. People ask me sometimes how I stayed so calm while my whole life was quietly collapsing around me. The truth is, I didn't survive it. I audited it. I let them underestimate me because nothing hides a forensic mind better than a woman everyone assumes is too hurt to think straight. They thought my silence was surrender. It was never surrender. It was just me, quietly, tying the knot they would eventually hang themselves with. If you take one thing from my story, let it this. Never let anyone convince you your worth depends on their approval. Don't scream, don't beg, don't perform your pain for people who already decided not to see it. Just step back, stay quiet, and follow the money, because the money never lies, and once you find the ledger, you hold the whole kingdom in the palm of your hand.